Welcome back again. It's Paul Ray from Think Accounts, and I'm here with Judy Reynolds from Opening Gates for this session on employees versus contractors. Now, Judy, we know that COVID certainly threw a spanner into the works. How do you see what's been happening since in the space of contractors and subcontractors?
Well, what happened over COVID was a lot of people decided to step away from the traditional employee arrangement and do contract-based work. They did that obviously without considering the impact of the legislation on that. There's seriously, as I understand it, the legislation impacts both the payer and the payee, and that can be quite dramatic at the end of the day, and it comes back to bite us sometime in the future, potentially when we don't have the money we need to pay the tax or to deal with the deal with what happens. I mean, also a lot of people now are dealing with the cost of living increases by setting up little side hustles, and they do that without understanding that yes, it's still a business. Yes, it still is required to deal with the legislation, particularly the legislation around employee versus contractor. So why is it that the tax office is so focused on the definition of employee versus contractor?
Well, one of the main reasons is that classifying contractors who are really employee-like means that there could be underpaid taxes for the employee, also from what the ATO is receiving. Lack of superannuation entitlements is a big one that the ATO are focusing on, that contractors perhaps aren't being paid in superannuation. So it can not only affect their workers' rights, but reduces the revenue for the government. So the government's obviously concerned about revenue, and one of the things that people who are basically contracting for their labour and they're being considered contractors when they are really employees, and I think probably a number of them may have found it that to get an ABN now you have to go through a series of questions on the ATO site, and if it is your income is going to be predominantly from your labour, you're going to find it hard to get an ABN to answer those questions correctly. So that's an issue for people who think they can get an ABN when they're just contracting for labour.
Okay. So it's stopped right at the beginning.
It can be, yeah. And the people then will have to make false representations when they're applying for it.
What are the risks to businesses if they do misclassify themselves, both from the payer's perspective and the payee's perspective?
Well, certainly from the payer's perspective, that the ATO can go back and they may say that, this person, we classify them as an employee, you're going to have to pay back PAYG, superannuation, and this can go back a number of years, and then on top of that you've got penalties, interest. So from an employee's point of view, it can be it can be catastrophic, and it could destroy their business if this has certainly been going on for some time and they just don't have the cash to cover it.
And do we see this happening across all industries, or is it more prevalent in different types of industries?
Look, it's probably more prevalent in the trades areas, although we've all seen there has been a lot of coverage in the recent years on some of the bigger franchise operations, if you like, where they're treated their employees as contractors, and the ATO have come down, as well as Fair Work, WorkSafe, etc. And then of course then you've got the State Revenue Office from a payroll tax point of view. They can then turn around and say, well, we want to assess you for payroll tax on these contractor payments going back over a number of years.
Okay, goodness. So what are the key differences between an employee and a contractor under the tax office guidelines?
Look, the main one is really over level of control. Okay, how much level of control does an employer or head contractor have over the work that their supposed subcontractors employ? Do they have set hours? Are they responsible for the outcome? In other words, are they responsible for rectifying the job if it's not complete? So they're the main ones. So they look at level of control, And there are some others, but the first one they'll look at is, and I think the first one they'll look at is, how much control do I have over this particular job? So if you've got someone who's, an example, say a painter, and they're coming in to paint this room, and they're paid on an hourly rate, they wear the company's overalls, etc., well then they'll be looked as an employee. However, if I was engaged for a fixed price, come in, paint this house, and basically it's got to be finished in the next couple of weeks, well, that could be seen to be a genuine contractor. I'm responsible for the job. There's no level of control as to the hours I work, etc. So these are probably the main ones that the ATO looks at. The other one would be the ability of the contractor to delegate the task to somebody else. And so it's important from that point of view to make sure that if you do have an engagement like that, where you can, to include that in the engagement. And that could be it could be a defining issue in the case of a challenge.
Goodness. So a lot of it, that we have the legislation, underlying legislation, but more often than not that legislation is interpreted by cases, and this is why it's so important to talk to our advisors, isn't it, who keep up to date with how the law is being interpreted and how we might have to adjust our behaviour or adjust our documentation to support that.
Absolutely, there have been a number of cases recently. One would be the share riding industry, where the ATO was sort of challenged that the Uber drivers, etc., were really employees. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, the courts found that the drivers were in fact contractors. They were contractors in their own right. So it's important that that we do know what's happening in that space as far as how the ATO is interpreting things and how the courts are interpreting them as well.
And how that will impact our particular circumstances. How can businesses ensure that they are correctly classifying workers or employees or contractors? What can they do?
Well, firstly, make sure that they do have some sort of contract, and make sure they understand what the conditions in that contract are, and that they are in compliance with the ATO's guidelines. There is a tool on the ATO site which, once again, it runs through a number of questions, and it'll spit out an answer: yes, you're a contractor, or yes, no, you're an employee. Now, that can be grey, and we have seen circumstances where a question was answered this way, and the ATO said, well, we think it should have been answered that way. So it can be a bit of a grey area, but the tool is certainly a good guideline to help small businesses and contractors understand just where they sit in the, am I an employee, am I a contractor?
Before making the call, I mean, we can all go down through and use that tool, but before making the call, they really need to have a conversation with their advisor. Yeah?
Absolutely, yeah. That should be your first point of contact. Call your accountant or your legal advisor, and they would probably be able to give you the answer anyway, but the tool will help you get an understanding of just how the ATO looks at it.
Okay, understand. So what actions can we take if we discover that we have misclassified ourselves, or we've been paying our contractors and in fact they're employees?
Well, the answer is act quickly. Act quickly. Let the ATO know what's happening. Show them that you've been proactive on managing the situation. It's important that they see that you are, and that you don't let it run on for a long period, because it doesn't go away. So act quickly. Contact your accountants, etc. Let them know the situation. See how they can help manage it. They can also help liaise with the ATO, put in place payment arrangements if necessary to manage any outstanding liabilities.
So how we're classified can change over time too, can't it? We might start as a contractor, and then our arrangements, our work changes, and now we're really an employee. So that can happen over time, and so we're never ever stop checking in to see whether we're classified appropriately.
Yeah, look, it's important for the employer as well as the employee or contractor to review their arrangements to see if there have been changes, and if there have been changes in legislation which would now perhaps address the situations a bit differently, which is happening now, with things like casual versus part-time workers. Legislation has now changed where casual workers can be interpreted as part-time, etc. So yes, it's important to make sure that we would readdress those changes in circumstances to see, is there something action we have to take before it gets too far down the track.
So what's the first thing you would suggest now? I've now realised that I need to be more proactive about checking in to see my status, whether I'm an employee or a contractor, or however that works. What's the first thing I should do? What's the next step for me?
The next step would be, contact your accountant. Excuse me. Contact your accountant, HR specialist, and that's usually something that your accountant will work in with, because this is a very, very complicated area now of employees, employment, and contractors and rights, etc. So it's something that we really need to probably have a HR specialist look at in many situations. So be proactive. First point, probably contact your accountant. Then they'll move forward and see what other expert information or assistance do we need.
Okay. Goodness.
Yes, it's a complex area, and it's something that we probably haven't, as an industry, addressed as much as we should have in the past. So, if we can be of help, certainly give us a call, email, or contact us via the link below. And thank you, Judy, once again for being a part of this session.
Thank you, Paul.